ipywidgets is a famous Python library that let us create interactive widgets in Jupyter Notebook and Jupyter Lab. It can help us create interactive UIs in Jupyter Notebook, enabling us to create rich applications without leaving the Jupyter Notebook. Currently, ipywidgets supports a wide range of interactive controls like drop-downs, checkboxes, text area, sliders, and many more. We can easily link these widgets with other Python data visualization libraries like matplotlib, bokeh, plotly, bqplot, etc. to create interactive data visualizations. Because of such a wide range of functionality available from ipywidgets, I personally feel that ipywidgets is a tool that everyone working with the data, whether it's a data scientist, ML engineer, or anyone, should have in their toolbox. With that thinking in mind, I decided to build a crash course where I will discuss ipywidgets in detail. This will help you and me both learn ipywidgets in depth. So this is the first video in the series where I will be explaining how to build simple UIs from Python functions using ipywidgets. The series will have around 7 videos. So without further delay, let's get started with the coding part. Alright, so as you can see on my screen, I have already launched Jupyter Notebook where we will be doing our coding part. So at the beginning of the notebook, I have highlighted the important section. So I will be covering 3 important functions which are available from ipywidgets, which is interact, interactive, and interactive output. These 3 functions can be used to create interactive UIs from Python functions. Now, before using ipywidgets, you need to install it. So you can install it using pip by using this command pip install ipywidgets. So feel free to install it before you get started with the coding. First of all, I have imported my ipywidgets and printed the current version which is installed on my system. So let me execute it. So current version is 8 on my system. So this is the latest version. In the next cell, I have imported a few important functions from ipywidgets which are interact, interactive output, and fix. So let me execute that cell as well. So the first function that I will explain is interact. Now in order to create any function UI from interact, we first need to create some functions. So as you can see, I have a simple function over here whose name is square, and this function accepts a single argument x, and then it squares the whatever argument is given and then it returns it. So in order to create interactive UI using interact function, we need to give our first function to interact when we call to interact, and then we need to give value of that argument. So if the default value is already present, then interact will take that value, but in our case there is no default value, so we need to provide value y except for 5. So once I execute this cell, so as you can see, interact created a slider for this argument x equal to 5, and below that it's printing the value which is the square of that value, input value 5. Now what I can do, I can change the value of this slider. So as you can see, as I am changing the value, the square is getting calculated and it's getting updated below. So yeah, as you can see, we can easily convert any function to interactive UIs using this interact function. So this was the first example. Now over here, as you can see, I provided this argument x equal to 5 for our functions. But if you have already some default value, so over here I have again declared our function x equal to square, but this time I have set default value for this argument x, which is 5. So let me execute this one. Now I don't need to provide the argument over here in call to interact. So if I execute this one, this will give me same result as the previous one. So as I change this, as you can see, squares are getting calculated. So as soon as you execute interact, it will create interactive UI and present result to you in the output cell. The interact function does not return anything. So this is the simplest way to use the interact function. Now you can also use interact function as a decorator. So over here I have again declared our function square with default argument x equal to 5, and I have added a decorator interact at the top, as you can see. And once I execute this cell, it will again create the same results, as you can see. And as I change the slider values, it's updating the square, you can see. So here's an example where I am providing value for x in decorator, as you can see. So this will also give me same result. Right, so in our first example, as you can see, we created a UI from simple function which only had one argument. There can be situation where our function has multiple arguments. So let's take for this example formula. So this function takes the three values a, b, and c, and then it calculates some random formula 5 star a, b star 7, and c star 10, sum all of them and returns. So let me execute this. Now, in order to create interactive UI for this particular function, we need to provide value for all the arguments a, b, and c. So let me execute this. And as you can see, this time Interact created three sliders, one for each argument. As you can see, as I change the value of the widgets, it's updating below the value, which is the output of this formula. Yeah, so it's that easy to create simple UIs using Interact. We simply need to provide the function and then values of the argument. Now there can be situation. So let's move to section 1.2. Now there can be situation where you don't want Interact to create widgets for all the parameters of your function. So let's say that I want Interact to create widgets for A and B only, but I don't want to create widget for C, and I want to set some fixed value. So how can I do that? So you can use fixed function. So I'm again calling Interact over here with our function, and then I have given value for A equal to 1, B equal to 1, and for C I have called this function fix and given it value 10. So it will fix the value of this parameter C to 10, and then it won't create a widget for it. So as you can see, now A and B widgets are created for those parameters, but for C the widget is not created. So as I change the value, it's updating the output. Alright, so let's move to section 1.3. Now you might have an obvious question like, how did Interact determine that it should create a slider for this particular case? Why it didn't create a drop down or checkbox or any other widget? How it came to conclusion that it should create a slider for this particular case? So how Interact decides? So Interact decides based on the value that you provide for particular argument or parameter. So let's say that you provide a true or false for a particular argument, then Interact will create a checkbox. If you provide a text value, then it will create a text box. If you provide integer value, single integer value, or some tuple of min max or min max step, then it will create int slider. Or if you provide a float value, then it will create float slider. And if you provide a list like good, bad, and so this kind of list of strings or list of tuples, then it will create a drop down. So based on the data type, it will create a particular widget. So over here I have again created our formula example, as you can see, and this time I am giving two value 1 and 10 and 1 to 50 for A and B, and C is again fixed. So let me execute this one. So as you can see, now this time it created a slider which starts from 1 to 10, and for the second B parameter it starts from 1 to 15. So if you provide a tuple like this, then it will create int slider with that min and max values, and by default it will set value which is in the middle. So here is the another example. So in this example, as you can see, I provided one of the values as a float. So if you provide any single value as float, then it will create a float slider. So as you can see, I can change the float value here. Alright, so here I have created one more example. So this time I am giving three values. So tuple of three values for this parameter A. So what this will do, so 1 will be the mean value of that slider, 10 will be the max value, and 2 will be the step. So let me execute this cell and show you. As you can see, after 5 it will go to 7, then 9, so on. And for second one it will go from 7 to 10, 13, and so on. So if you provide a tuple of three integers or three floats, then first is minimum, second is maximum, and third is the step. And here is one more example where I have created a float widget. You can see A is a float widget because I have provided step size of 0.5, which is for float widgets. All right, so I have again created one more example. So this is the concat function, and it takes two parameters, a and b, and both are string. It accepts string, and then it simply sums that two strings and returns it. So let's create a UI for this function. So for a argument, I have provided string value, and for b, I have provided world. So if I execute this one, now it creates a text box, as you can see, and as I change the value in the text box, it will update the output of that function, as you can see below. And here is one more example. So this example, I have provided a list of strings, so it will create a drop down. So let me execute this. As you can see, hello. Let me select hi from the drop down, so it says hi world. Let me select hi coders column, so it says hi coders column. So yeah, so as you can see, this gives us more control in creation of widgets. As you can see, based on the data type, we can provide min, max, and step values, and so on. Right, so let's move on to section 1.4. Now, all our previous example, we did not created any widget by ourselves. Interact function created a widget for ourselves. And let's say that you want more control in widget creation. So as you can see over here, that in this case, the interact function created this label to a, which is the parameter of the function a and b. So you want that some default other name should be there as a label other than a and b, like param1, param2. Other than that, you don't like default value, that it by default it selects a default value hello, which is the first, but you want to select welcome to, which is at index 2 as a default value. So if you want more control, then what you can do is that you can create widgets yourself. So over here I imported widgets, which is our ipywidgets library, and it has a bunch of functions which can be used to create different types of widgets. So over here I am creating int slider, and I am setting value to 2. So this is the default value. Then I am setting min to 0, maximum to 10, step to 1, and this parameter description I have set to param1. So this will be the label, and the same way I have created another widget. Now I have created these two widgets, and this widget we can give to interact. So I am again calling our formula function from earlier, and for a argument I am giving widget 1, for b widget 2, and c I have again kept fixed. So let me execute this particular, and as you can see 2 is by default, so we can set default value by 2. If we let interact create widget, then it would have selected 5 by default. So that's the benefit. You have more control over widget creation. And over here, as you can see, we can change the string, which is param1 and param2. Otherwise by default those string will be a and b. Okay, and for each widget, the value of whatever selection is done is available through this value attribute. So anytime you can retrieve the value through this value attribute, and you can also set this value attribute. So over here, as you can see, for param1 the current value is 5, and if I set it to 4, as you can see, it will update over here in UI, and the output will be updated as well. All right, so let's create one more example. Over here I am creating a text box. I am creating two text box, and we are again using our concat function, which simply adds two strings. So let me execute this, and as you can see over here we get more control. As you can see over here, the name is param1 and param2, and we were able to set default values to hello. Again we can retrieve the value. So hey is set, and let's say I again want to change it to hello. Then as you can see over here, hello is updated and hello world is updated. Right, so here is one more example. So over here I am creating drop down. For creating drop downs, you need to provide options. So here is a list of strings, and by default I have selected index 2. So index 2 is welcome to, and for this one index 3 is selected for second drop down, which is coders column. So let me execute this cell, and yeah, as you can see now welcome to is selected by default and coders column is selected by default, and as you change the value, the string gets updated. So again you can call value on any widget and retrieve the current selected values. Right, so here is one more example. So it's simply repeat of our previous example. Right, so let's move on. And yeah, as you can see, now when you create a drop down, instead of simply providing list of strings, you might want some kind of mapping, like if user selects hello, you might want to return 0 or some kind of indexing. So in order to do that, you need to provide this kind of tuple as a list. Let me execute this. Now if I check the drop one value of this drop one, it will be 2. So welcome to has a value of 2. Whereas in previous cases, as you can see, when we do drop one dot value, it return actual string. Whereas in this case, it returned this index. Yeah, so over here I have explained how you can create a float slider. So you can provide value, min, max, and then step. So this will create a float slider, and you can also specify description. So description will be the name of that widget. So let's say I say param1, and as you can see, the label is added. And over here, I can retrieve the value by calling dot value. If I change over here, then let me check. So it's 8. And yeah, over here I have explained how you can create a checkbox. So for checkbox, the value is true or false. So for checkbox, I have added description, whether you want to save model or not. So I can select it or unselect it. So let me select it. Now let me check the value of save model. So if I say save model dot value, then as you can see, it returns true. If I unselect it, then the value will be false. So here is one more example. So this is the radio buttons widget. If you are interested in creating radio buttons, so you can provide options, which are list of options. So I have provided options 1, 2, and 3. And index is which options should be selected by default. So index is 2. So by default, this option 3 will be selected. So let me execute this cell, and as you can see, the option 3 is selected. And if I call radio buttons dot value, it returns me option 3. If I select option 2, then as you can see, it returns option 2. Alright, so let's move on to next section. The next section is on prevent continuous update. So let me execute this cell. So it's our previous example, and as you can see over here, as soon as I move the slider, the values below are getting updated. So it continuously updates. As long as I move slider, it updates. Now in this example, as you can see, it's simply printing a text to the output, so that is not a problem. But you might have a function over here instead of formula, some other functions which might be creating some kind of chart. And in that case, if every time I change the value of the slider, it updates the chart, then it can create fluctuations. And if you want to prevent that fluctuations, then that you can do using continuous update parameter. So you want that after you have moved values over here and there, and when you have selected final values and you leave the cursor, then it should update the chart. So we can do that. So there are two ways to do it. First is that when you create a slider, you need to specify this parameter continuous update, and you need to set it value to false. So by default it is true. So for both of these parameters over here, I have set it to false. So let me execute this. And now as you can see, when I am moving, it's not updating the below value. But as soon as I leave, then it's updating the value. So let's see. As long as I have held this particular slider, it won't update the output value. But when I leave it, then it will update the output value. So yeah, if you want to prevent fluctuations, then you can set a continuous update to false for each of the widgets. So remember this, you need to set this inside widget creation functions. And other than that, there is another way to handle this, which is instead of interact, you can use a function name interact manual. So let me execute this. Now as you can see in this case, that there is a button over here. So what happens in this case is that after I select different values, and then I can submit this button run interact, and then the function will run. So after I submit run interact, then it will calculate the values based on the values of sliders. So yeah, so that's it. Let's move to next section. Okay, so the second function that we will discuss is interactive. So interactive is work exactly like interact function, but there is only one difference. So in case of interact, as you can notice, as soon as we execute the function, the output UI will be created with all the widgets. The interact function does not return anything. So you might want to display this UI on some later cell. So how you can do that? So in order to do that, there is a function named interactive. So I have already imported this function, and I have again declared our formula function over here, which accepts three arguments a, b, c, and calculates the value. So as you can see, this function interact returns a GUI, and then we can use a display function which is available from IPython to display this GUI. So by default, when you call interactive function, it will simply create a UI, but it won't display it. In order to display that UI, you need to call display function. So it works exactly like interact, but it gives you something as an output which you can display later, unlike interact, which will immediately display the UI. So I can call type of GUI, so it's interactive. And if you want to see like children's of this GUI, you can call children on it, children attribute. And as you can see, it's saying that the first one is int slider, the second one is again int slider, and the third one is the output widget. So in output widget, this value 124 is getting created. So output widget is also another type of a widget where you can add different kind of data like charts, videos, images, and so on. Different kind of content you can display in output widgets. In our next video, I will be covering these output widgets in more detail. And if you want to know what argument values are there, so as you can see, I have selected 2 for parameter A and 1 for parameter B. So let me execute this. Over here, as you can see, A is selected as 2, B is 1, and C is 10, which we have fixed for all our examples. Right, so let's move on to our third and last function. So interactive output is exactly like two previous examples, interact and interactive functions, but it gives us more control over how we can declare widgets and how we can create UIs. So interactive output function, as the name suggests, it works exactly like interactive function, but instead of returning interactive like this, it will return an output widget. So as you can see, I have again declared our formula function over here, and then I have created two widgets, two sliders, and over here I have called interactive output function. I have given our function formula, and for parameters, as you can see, I have given dictionary over here. The output of this is a GUI, which is an output widget, and in order to display all these widgets and this output widget, we can call display function. So let me execute this, and we can give as many widgets and objects to this display function. It will display all of them one by one. So as you can see, as I change the value, it's updating the value, and I can show you the type of GUI this time. So if I call type of GUI, as you can see, this time it's output widget. Yeah, so here is one more example. So in this example, as you can see over here, I have kept widgets first and then the output function. But in this example, I have kept the output value of the function first and then widget values. So if you want to organize like this, then you can do that as well. Alright, so that's it for today's tutorial. If you have any doubts or any question, then please feel free to let me know in the comment section. If you want to learn more about ipywidgets, then you can visit our website coders column. I have a detailed tutorial over there. And stay tuned to our channel as we will be publishing more videos on this ipywidgets library. And yeah, see you next time.